Okay, real talk. How many English learning videos do you have saved right now that you have never actually watched?
Chris, why are you attacking people immediately?
I'm just asking a question.
A very specific question.
Because I had 47 saved. 47! I'll watch this later. Later never came.
The watch later playlist that becomes a graveyard.
A beautiful, organized graveyard of good intentions.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle. Welcome back to Daily English Listening Podcast. So glad you're here.
And I'm Chris. Today we're talking about something that I think every English learner has experienced: procrastinating your English practice, wanting to improve, meaning to practice, and then somehow ending up doing literally anything else.
No judgment here. This is one of the most human things there is.
Extremely human. We have all been there.
Just settle in and listen. This one is going to feel very, very familiar.
Possibly uncomfortably familiar.
So let's start with the pattern, because I think before we talk about solutions, it's important to just name what's actually happening, because it's not random.
Right, it's not like you forget you want to learn English. You think about it all the time.
You think, I should practice today, and you mean it.
Completely sincere.
And then something happens. You check your phone for a second, you watch one video, you tell yourself you'll do it after dinner.
After dinner becomes after this show becomes tomorrow morning becomes, well, I'll start fresh on Monday.
Monday is doing so much work in people's lives.
Monday is exhausted.
And the frustrating part is, you actually want to learn. You're not indifferent, you care. You just keep not doing it.
Which makes the guilt worse.
Because you can't even blame it on not caring. You care, and you're still not doing it.
And then the guilt makes starting feel even heavier.
Because now it's not just practice English, it's practice English and also deal with the fact that you haven't in 3 weeks.
That's so much pressure to put on a 5-minute exercise.
Exactly. The task itself is small. The emotional weight around it is enormous.
Okay, drop a comment right now. Tell us, what is the one thing you keep saving, bookmarking, or telling yourself you'll do for your English practice and never actually do? Be honest. We really want to know.
Because I promise you, whatever you answer, someone else is going to read it and think, oh, thank goodness, me too.
You are not the only one with a graveyard playlist.
Not even close. Okay, so why does this actually happen? Because I think people assume procrastination means you're lazy, and that's just not true.
Not true at all. Some of the most motivated, hardworking people procrastinate constantly.
Because procrastination isn't about laziness, it's about discomfort avoidance.
Say more about that.
Your brain is trying to protect you from something that feels uncomfortable, and learning a language, really practicing it, speaking it, making mistakes, that's uncomfortable.
Especially speaking. Speaking is the most uncomfortable part.
Because when you speak, you expose yourself. You might say something wrong, someone might not understand you, you might feel embarrassed.
And your brain, very helpfully, says, you know what, let's just not do that right now.
Super helpful. Thank you, brain.
And scrolling Instagram has zero discomfort, so that wins by default.
It's not a fair competition.
At all. And another big one, not knowing where to start.
This one is huge for English learners specifically, because the language is so big. There's grammar, vocabulary, listening, speaking, pronunciation, writing.
And if you open an app or a website and you're faced with all of that at once,
The brain shuts down.
too many options equals zero action.
Which is why people end up doing nothing even when they had 30 minutes and good intentions.
Because practice English is not a task, it's a category.
And categories don't get done. Specific small actions get done.
Watch one video and repeat 3 sentences out loud, that's a task.
That I can do.
That anyone can do.
So part of what's happening when you procrastinate your English is that the task is too big and too vague to even start.
And your brain looks at it and goes, I don't know where to grab this, so I'll do it later when I have more energy to figure it out.
And later never has more energy.
Later is a lie we tell ourselves.
The most comfortable lie.
Okay, so I want to talk about something specific to English learners because I think there's a version of procrastination that's particular to language learning.
What's that?
Passive consumption without active practice. You watch English videos, you listen to podcasts like this one, you follow English accounts, and you feel like you're learning.
But you never speak, never write, never actually produce anything in English.
Right, and consuming content feels productive. It feels like studying.
But it's the comfortable version of studying.
The version with no risk, no exposure, no possibility of getting something wrong.
Because nobody can judge you for watching a video.
But watching without doing is like reading about swimming and never getting in the water.
You learn a lot about swimming, you cannot swim.
Exactly, and I think a lot of learners get stuck in that loop. They consume more and more content, hoping that at some point the speaking will just happen naturally.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't, because speaking is a separate skill that you only build by speaking.
Even badly, even alone, even to yourself in the car.
Even to yourself in the car, yes. Talking to yourself in English is one of the most underrated practices there is.
I did this, still do. I narrate things sometimes.
What do you narrate?
Like, okay, I'm making coffee now. I'm going to pour the water. The water is hot. Just describing what I'm doing in English.
That's genuinely useful, by the way, because it forces you to find words for everyday things.
And everyday things are exactly what you need in real conversations.
Not complicated vocabulary, just the words for the things around you.
Okay, so we've talked about why it happens. Let's talk about what actually helps. And I want to be really clear. We're not going to say study 3 hours a day.
Please, if that worked for most people, nobody would be procrastinating.
The whole premise of just study more ignores the actual problem.
The problem is starting, not the amount.
So the solution has to be about making starting easier, not making the practice longer or harder.
The first thing that actually helps, shrinking the task until it's almost embarrassingly small.
How small?
5 minutes. Genuinely 5 minutes.
That feels pointless.
It feels pointless, but here's what happens. Once you start, you usually keep going, because starting was the hard part.
And if you only do 5 minutes, you still did 5 minutes.
Which is 5 minutes more than 0, and more than you did yesterday.
And the next day, 5 minutes again. And slowly, not dramatically, just slowly, your English gets better.
Because 5 minutes every day is over 30 hours in a year.
That's a lot of English.
A lot of English from 5 minutes.
Okay, another thing that helps, removing the question of what to practice. Because decision fatigue is real. If every time you sit down to practice, you have to first figure out what to practice, that's already 2 tasks, not 1.
And the decision alone can be exhausting enough to make you quit before you start.
So decide in advance. Every day at this time, I do this specific thing. Not, I'll practice English today.
I will repeat the last 5 minutes of the podcast I listened to. Specific.
I will describe 3 things in my room in English. Specific.
I will text 1 sentence to myself in English. Specific.
Specific tasks get done. Vague intentions don't. And I want to add something about the environment piece because I think it matters a lot, specifically for English practice.
Go ahead.
A lot of people practice English in complete isolation, like it's a secret activity they do alone.
And there's nothing wrong with that at some stages.
But at some point, you need real input, real English, real voices, not just yourself.
And that's where passive listening becomes genuinely useful, not as a replacement for speaking, but as input that feeds your speaking later.
Like this podcast, you're not just learning vocabulary right now, you're hearing rhythm, intonation, how sentences connect.
And that goes into your brain when you're not actively studying.
So passive listening plus small active moments, even 1 sentence spoken aloud, that combination is actually very powerful.
More powerful than either one alone.
And here's something I think is important. You don't need a perfect environment to practice.
People wait for the right moment, the right setup, the right energy level.
The moment when they feel ready and motivated and the house is quiet and there are no distractions.
That moment almost never comes, and if you wait for it, you'll wait for a long time.
Practice in the car. Practice while you cook. Practice in the 2 minutes before a meeting starts.
Small pockets of time add up, and they're actually better than one long session sometimes because you're using English in different contexts, different times of day, different energy levels.
Which is closer to what real conversation feels like.
Real conversation doesn't wait for you to be ready either.
It really doesn't.
Okay, the wild card thought I want to add here, and this one is specifically for people who feel guilty about how long they've been meaning to practice.
The guilt people.
The guilt people. Here's the thing. The time you spent not practicing, it's gone.
You cannot get it back.
Which sounds harsh.
But the next 5 minutes are completely available, right now. So the only question that matters is what you do with the next 5 minutes.
Not what you should have done last month, what you do now.
And if what you do now is one small thing, one sentence, one word, 1 minute of speaking aloud,
that counts. That is practice. That is forward movement.
progress doesn't have to be dramatic to be real.
It just has to happen.
Consistently, even if it's small.
And one thing I want to say specifically about English, the progress is sometimes invisible for a while.
What do you mean?
Like, you practice for 2 weeks and you don't feel noticeably better. Your speaking doesn't suddenly flow. Your vocabulary doesn't double.
And that's the moment most people quit.
Because it feels like nothing is working.
But something is working, it's just working underneath the surface.
The brain is building connections, patterns are forming, words are getting more familiar even when you don't feel it yet.
And then one day you hear a phrase you've been practicing and it just comes out naturally.
Without thinking, without translating, just there.
And that's when you realize, oh, it was working all along.
The invisible progress was real, you just couldn't see it yet.
Which is why quitting during that quiet phase is the most expensive mistake in language learning.
You stop right before the payoff.
Every time.
Especially if it's small, because small things you actually do are worth infinitely more than big things you plan and never start.
You don't need to study more, you just need to start.
Even if it's small, even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's just talking to yourself in the car.
Start now, adjust later.
All right, let's spend a moment on some of the words and expressions we use today, because a few of them are genuinely worth keeping.
Starting with procrastinate, and this is a word worth knowing well because it's everywhere in English. To procrastinate means to delay doing something even when you know you should do it. I've been procrastinating on that project. Stop procrastinating and just start. It's not the same as being lazy, it's specifically about delaying something intentional.
Then avoidance, the behavior of staying away from something uncomfortable. Avoidance is a very human response. She realized her avoidance was making things worse. When something feels hard or risky, avoidance is the brain's automatic move. Recognizing it as avoidance, not as preference, changes how you respond to it.
Passive versus active, and this distinction is huge for language learners. Passive means receiving without producing. Active means producing, creating, responding. He spent months on passive listening, but never practiced active speaking. Passive consumption feels productive. Active practice is what actually builds skill.
Intention, what you plan or mean to do, as opposed to what you actually do. I had good intentions but never followed through. The intention was there, the action wasn't. In English, this word often appears in the phrase good intentions, meaning someone means well even if the result is not great.
Consistency, showing up regularly over time, even in small ways. Consistency matters more than intensity. She wasn't perfect, but she was consistent. This word comes up constantly in conversations about habits, language learning, fitness, anything that requires repeated effort. Consistent doesn't mean perfect, it means regular.
Momentum, the forward energy that builds as you keep going. Harder to start, easier to maintain once moving. Once she had momentum, stopping felt wrong. I lost my momentum after the break and had to rebuild. In everyday English, you'll hear build momentum, lose momentum, and gain momentum very frequently.
Friction. Anything that makes starting harder than it needs to be. Reduce the friction between you and the habit. Originally a physics term, now used constantly in productivity and habit conversations. There's too much friction in this process. Lowering friction means removing the obstacles between you and the first action.
And vague versus specific, two opposites that come up constantly when talking about goals and tasks. Practice English is vague. Repeat 5 sentences from a podcast is specific. I want to improve is vague. I will speak for 3 minutes tomorrow morning is specific. Native speakers use vague and specific this way in everyday conversation, not just in academic contexts.
And hey, if today's conversation made you think about the moment you freeze before speaking, the nervousness, the overthinking, we have an episode that goes directly into that.
It's right below this one. Go find it.
See you there.